Hey everybody out there in YouTube land again. It's Rob the History Smith here with poor quality video. This is one of the probably third or fourth I filmed a while ago and lost the audio. You can see the frame rate sucks. But anyways, what are we looking at here? We're looking at a P53 Enfield. That one there is an original. The first one, that was a reproduction. And oddly enough, the original is better than the repercussion. So the problem I have today, if you noticed, when you half pull the trigger, you shouldn't be able to drop the hammer. You need to go full cock. And that one you can see drops. That is a safety issue, particularly with something like a muzzle loader where your head is at the wrong side. So no bueno. We have to fix this, don't we? Nice thing about percussions is they are simple. I know a lot of people talk about this being simple, that being simple, but percussion rifles, they're simple. So, taking out the plate screws, pull the hammer back so it's not interfering with the nipple. We can pull that off and we can set that aside. I don't remember what's happening here and why this is repeating. It could be I'm crazy, or it could be I'm crazy. I think I'm crazy. Is it my imagination, or is this... Okay, here we're taking apart the original one now. Wow. I don't know what's going on in this video, guys. I apologize. I'm pretty sure I was sober during editing, but not always. Maybe that's the issue. So the original is actually not fully original. I did have to replace the lock because it was missing, but the hammer and everything else is original. But there's the half-cock Sear. And that's the half-cock Sear. You can see it's actually missing quite a bit of material. So there's the proper half-cock. You see the way it's capturing the tumbler so the hammer can't fall. And you can see the broken one is literally broken. So this is a good example of what can happen to a firearm with time. This is not an old firearm. This is an abused firearm. If you're pulling back on the hammer and you're just letting it drop from the half-cock position or from the full position, and you're just pulling back slowly and letting the hammer fall, what could happen is it can hit that second sear, and either your tumbler, which is attached to the hammer, is going to break, or in this case the sear itself actually broke, and that's not good. I know the person I got this off of, he didn't do it. He loaned it to a friend. Don't loan your stuff to a friend if you want it back in the same condition you got it, because your friends aren't your friends. So I'm taking off the bridle here, disassembling the lock. The first thing I put on there was a spring capture device. I don't know the exact name offhand, but what it does is it compresses the spring safely to allow you to disassemble everything. Go out, get one, guys, if you're going to be doing this stuff. Even if you're going to do it once, go out and get it. It's a cool little piece of gear. It's $10, something like that. They're not expensive. And you look like you know what you're doing. Wiggling that hammer off. And now the spring compress comes off, and now we're left with the spring, the lock plate, that's the sear. So I have to somehow ideally I would have welded material on, but again, this is a little bit earlier, but the metal's been pushed out of place so I can actually tap it back in place. Some of it's completely missing, so I'm going to have to figure out how to recut that sear. The nice part about a half-cock Sear is you're not supposed to be able to pull the trigger. I mean, that's the whole point of it. So how you cut it doesn't really matter as long as it holds the hammer back. The problem with removing material, as you remove it, the hammer's going to fall closer and closer and closer to the primer, to the point where it's just touching the primer, and it defeats the purpose of having a half-cock Sear. So to start with, I need to remove material. I could add material, like I said, by welding, but I don't have a welder at this point. I do now. So I'm cutting into that sear and making that notch, or sorry, cutting into the tumbler so the sear will fit down into the notch a bit better. Got a bit backwards on the things. Sorry guys about that. That's the tumbler. The sear is actually a part of the trigger. And the sear is fine. It's the tumbler that's damaged. So I lock it in place. What I do is I'm pulling down on the hammer to mimic the spring force. And then I'm pushing up on the trigger bar there. That's the trigger bar. That has the other part of the sear. And you can see I can push up and the hammer still falls. What I wanted to do is really lock it in place. So I realized need more precision than the hacksaw can give me, because I need to cut it at a specific angle, not just deep. So here we go. And again, do a little bit at a time. Gunsmithing is a job of microns, not miles. So take it slow. Don't mess it up. So that should be locking into the half sear. I'm just checking my angles, marking them. The other thing I'm missing at this point too is a set of diamond files. Sears are going to be hardened. Either in replicas, in this case it's going to be steel. Back in the day it probably would have been a steel. And they would have been case hardened. And when I say case hardened, I mean they're hardened with blanking here. Hardened with carbon. Carbon comes from bone. And right now I'm destroying the temper on this, right? I'm making it soft on purpose. Getting it nice and hot. Red hot. Temper's gone. This is now soft. I can rework it with the hammer without snapping it. This is, again, you got to be careful and really use your brain when you're doing something like this, because you can totally mess up this sear, and what's going to happen is chance of having an unsafe firearm, not so high. Having a firearm that just doesn't work, yeah, that's what's going to happen. You snap that nose off, your firearm's not going to fire at all. You're going to have to go out and find a whole new lock, which luckily for something like an Enfield, they're not that hard to find, because they're really popular for reenactors both in Canada and in Britain and places like that. And the US too, because it was a popular firearm during the Civil War, used by both the Confederates and the Union. So now I've straightened out that sear mechanism on the trigger bar there, and I'm just tweaking ever so slightly, I'm cleaning up burrs and little things like that from the hammering. You see it didn't much come off there. You saw like 2 sparks. You can imagine how much metal came off there. Almost nothing. Test, retest. At that point, I'm kind of liking what I'm seeing, right? I can put some pressure on there where the spring would be, and when I pull the trigger, it doesn't want to pop out right away. So I'm getting close, but I can still overpower it. Kind of like well, I can overpower it, so that's the problem, right? You don't half cock sear. You shouldn't be able to overpower it by pulling the trigger. If you can overpower it, it's messed up like this. If you pull real hard, you're just gonna break it, and neither of those is a good thing. At least breaking a sear, you know you screwed up. If you have a sear drop without expecting it, then that's scary. A little more cutting. I think really what I'm doing here is more reshaping than cutting. I'm making sure that the interaction between the sear and the tumbler, there's no gap where the sear touches the tumbler. Anytime you have a gap, you're putting a stress point on either the tumbler itself or back to the trigger transfer, the trigger bar, and stress leads to breaks. Ask me how I know, and I'll tell you a secret. Check, 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 check. Shape, shape, shape. Check, check, check. Shape, shape, shape. What I'm doing there is actually, at this point, I'm reprofiling the main sear. Again, careful, guys, careful. You're responsible for your firearms, and you're responsible for what they do. If your firearm is worn, it's your responsibility to fix it. If you mess with your firearm, it's your responsibility to make sure you're fixing it right. And a sear is, I can't even describe how safety important a sear is. I was equating it in another video to brakes on your car. And you don't want to lose your brake, you don't want to lose your sear. It's the same disastrous results, a scary, uncontrollable accident just waiting to happen. So what here I'm using is an Arkansas stone. What that does, it basically polishes and removes micro amounts. And that's the thing, if you ever pull a trigger that feels gritty, it's because the sear itself, when I say gritty, I mean you'll get a start and stop kind of feel. When you're pulling the trigger, it's not smooth, like, it's not smooth. But you'll see the difference if you go to a gun store and ask them, what's a good trigger and what's a bad trigger? What should I be looking for? Hopefully they'll give you an example. And the funny thing is, a lot of firearms will smooth out as you fire them. But again, that's wear. 10 years of wear is one thing. 110 years, you're looking at problems. It's like your brakes on your car, right, guys? A car that has brakes that are a year old is going to be good. A car that's 10 years old, and its brakes are probably going to be shot. And here we go, the case hardening. So all those parts that I heated up earlier, remember I told you to destroy the temper? So now I'm going to use the Brownell's surface hardening compound. Company used to make it called Cherry Red. I don't know what happened to them, but hey, Brownell sells the same stuff. Like I said, it's pretty much ground up bone for carbon. And the way it works is you have to get the part, as the original product said, Cherry Red. Dip it. Reheat it. This part gets a little bit harder because you can't actually see very easily how red the part's getting, but it's hard to overdo it, put it that way. I'm just using MAP. If I was using oxyacetylene, that's a bad idea. I could melt the part, burn them. And the other thing is I don't need to harden the entire piece. I just need to harden the sear surface where they interact. Hardening the whole piece is ideal, but you need something like a kiln or something like that to do that. So there I dipped it in, I believe it was water that time. These are small pieces. You're not going to have major problems. So here we go for the second piece. This is the tumbler. And there's actually two spots, so I'm trying to heat both of them evenly to get them to cherry red. And in case you're wondering, MAP is the yellow bottle at the, the Home Depot or wherever you shop. And blue is the propane. The difference is MAP just gets hotter. That's all. It just burns hotter. I prefer it. I don't know why there's propane out there. Because MAP just does the job quicker. It's kind of like the difference between like a 200 watt microwave and a 400 watt microwave. Do the same job, just one does it faster. And they don't get hot to the point where they're going to, like I said, draw the carbon out and scorch the metal and destroy it. I've never done that, but then I don't mess around with oxyacetylene. There we go. So what you didn't see, there's a dip there in the carbon before, in the I call it carbon, the surface hardening. Now, case hardening here is not the same as color case hardening. It's the same basic idea, but not done in the same way. So what I've done by case hardening it is I've added a microscopically thin but glass hard surface to this thing. Clean up, just hit it with a wire brush, nothing fancy. Throw your brass brush in your Dremel or steel brush. Again, these aren't parts to be seen, they're functioning parts, so if the finishes don't match the outside, no one's gonna know. So reassembly here. You got the hammer, tumbler, the trigger bar, the bridle. That there is the Sear spring to keep everything biased in the right direction. This firearm's a little bit wonky, even though it's probably from the 70s. It could be a little bit earlier, but when I say 70s, I don't mean 1870s, I mean 1970s. The disco time. We all gonna love the disco. Disco, disco duck. The screw. Now the spring. Remember that little tool I had? I never took the spring out of tension. Hooks over the tumbler. Sits up on a wedge on the plate, and there's a little notch that it also fits into. You'll see if you ever do these. So we're getting ready for reassembly. And the problem I'm having now with reassembly is you see that lower part, because I've changed the dimensions, is dropping. The mainspring is dropping a little bit lower. So in order to get it to fit, I have to remove some wood. Of course, be careful whenever you're working with something like this, because you're not going to do anything that will stop the fire from working. But what you could end up doing is, here we go, testing, just damaging the wood. All right, let's do a test, shall we? Half cock. I can't drop it. Full cock. It drops. We're good to go. I should do a little bit of a hammer test, but like, subscribe, and I'll do more like this, guys. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.